Hey homeschool friends, welcome back to the channel. So it's review season. So I love reviewing curriculum, especially some of my favorite curriculum. And today we're going to be talking about one of my favorites. It's what we used this past year for history, Bible, and literature. We used Sonlight's HBL-B. And that was year 1 of 2 world history. So I started this last summer, and at that time my kids were a newly turned 7 as well as an 8.5-year-old. And the age range given on the Sonlight website is 7 to 9-year-olds. So my kids were in the sweet spot for this program, and I found that to be very much the case. So hi, my name is Angie. Welcome to the channel if you're new, or welcome back if you've been coming for a while. So like I said, we are going to be talking all about Sonlight's HBL-B program, and my plan for the video is to go through all the resources. I put them out on my table here, and we're going to chat through some of my favorites, some of my not so favorites, as well as what my kids really liked. And then I'm going to end the video with kind of some bigger picture thoughts of like, how did the program land? How well do I feel like they learned? Things like that we're going to chat about at the end of the video. But quickly, before I get into all of these wonderful resources, I did want to mention we also use Sonlight Science, and I'll be reviewing that next. So that should be the next video that comes out on this channel. And we also use Language Arts, which I have a couple review videos, which I can link above. I also decided to throw all of my videos for this year in one playlist. So I will link that above, and that way if you are curious about this program and you want to see how it went on a month-to-month basis, I'm going to put all my monthly update videos in there, as well as unboxings and all the things, so you can kind of get it all in one place. So I just wanted to let you know that, because sometimes filtering through all my videos can be a challenge. So let's hop in, you guys. Let's hop into the books. I think I'll start with history because that's HBL. Let's do history first. So here are the books for history for HBL-B, and we loved them. We loved them for different reasons though. So let me just go through some of them. So there are 2 Usborne books. These are kind of your spines for the history for this year, and actually they will be the spines for our history next year when we go through level C, which is year 2 of 3 for world history. But these are great because they're just different. So this one, I'll start with this one because I feel like this is the most spine book there is, and this is the Usborne book of world history. And it's a classic Usborne book where there's lots of good pictures and things to read. This was really helpful. I feel like what I liked about this book is the pictures and the supporting information that really helped flesh out what we were learning, because I guess the other main spine book that we used for this program was this one. And this is called A Child's History of the World by Virgil M. Hillier. So this book is more of a story form of history. So it goes kind of chapter by chapter, working its way through history. And what I liked is that this was easier to read. This is not textbooky. This is very conversational. It throws in some real interesting facts. I feel like it hooked my kids a lot more than the Usborne book, but the Usborne book was great for bringing out what we had learned in here. Now, as for did my kids like this, I'd say it came and went. It really depended on the topic in history, right? There were some things that happened that were just so much more fascinating, such as like the Trojan War and all of those things where there was just like battle after battle after battle. My kids loved that. They thought that was really interesting. They also liked all the kind of Olympics and Spartans and all the kind of like tough gladiator type history that they found in here, because it really personalized it and it made it feel more real to them. But I'd say the combo of these 2 really did work. It worked really well as to have that after we read through the chapter in the Hillier book. And then this one just rounded it out. And if you asked my kids which was their favorite history book, they said this one and the next one I'm going to talk about. And so this is the Time Traveler book. And so this is where you got to pretend you were this boy who traveled through time, and we went to ancient Egypt as well as the Roman world, and then we're going to do the other 2 next year. And it's really fun because this put even more of a story format on it. It was like, okay, well, we went to ancient Egypt and we followed this family, and it was a wealthy family, and what did they do? What did their kids do? How did they live their life on a daily basis? Things like that you got to see through this book. And then, like I said, it's kind of a classic Usborne style picturing as well, but it just took a different flair to it. It's less information, more kind of story meets encyclopedia, I guess. So it really worked for my kids. And then the other one that they really liked, and I'm not even sure if I would call this history as much as like geography. Actually, that's what I would call it. This was the Around the World with Kate and Mac. I'll look at languages from A to Z, and this is put out by the Wycliffe Bible translators. They thought this was really interesting because we got to talk about just different people groups around the world, and we got to talk about the status of the Bible translation in their country. And sometimes it would even highlight different missionaries that went into those countries and spent a lot of their lives trying to bring the Bible to these people. And it really inspired my kids, and I think they really got to think a little bit more about how fortunate we are to have the Bible, mini Bibles in our house, and just the accessibility we have to God's Word. This book really brought that alive, but this book also really helped us with finding places on the globe, and we were able to pull out the globe a lot. And so did the history, but I mean, if you're talking ancient history, right, you're kind of in one general area, but they did really enjoy looking at all the different maps that Sonlight has with the program. We have the small map as well as the big map as well as our globe. So we were able to pull out some geography, which the kids really liked, as well as the timeline books. I'm not sure why I didn't bring either of those resources with me, but the timeline book and the maps really helped take the information we were learning in these books to a deeper level, which I really enjoyed. So that's history with some geography and timeline and stuff. So those were the resources. My daughter liked this one best, and my son liked the time traveler one the best. And I was surprised by how much I like the Children's History of the World book. I was kind of prepared not to like it. So there's some resources for Bible. And so this book came with an earlier edition. It doesn't come with the one that is currently being sold, but we already had that resource and we love it and we read it prior. And so having this was helpful. And this one's called Leading Little Ones to God. So you guys, this probably of all of the books in this stack surprised me the most. I thought it was going to be something that didn't hold my kids' attention. I felt like it was going to be kind of older language, because if you read through it, it will have like prayers that include like thee and thou, and I just don't do well with that, and my kids definitely don't. And so we didn't use the prayers a lot. We really used this resource more for the readings, and the readings were good. They were pretty short. So it's like, this one's called God's Children Trust Him, and it's like a page and a little bit. And it was the perfect length, and it was the perfect jumping off point for discussion. So that's why this book might be one of my favorites of the year, because as a mom, I really appreciated the conversations I was able to have with my kids about their faith, about how they understood God's promises, and do they even know what God's promises are. And we could just have a lot of those discussions, and it was good to reveal some of the things they just didn't either quite understand, or they understood a little too simply, and that they could grow in that. And it was really fun to have those conversations. And so we also have a lot of our Bible memory verses from this year. So did we memorize 36 different verses from the Bible because there's 36 weeks in the program? No. I feel like I came and went with this, and I feel like I was gauging it off of my kids' ability to hold on to this information. And so I'd say I have probably about 15 cards here. We probably were able to do 15 of the weeks. And it's great though, because I have the cards, and we're able to go back through these, and my kids learned quite a bit of them. And that's just really sweet and really fun. And I love the fact that Sonlight helped me do that, or at least it helped me stay a little bit more consistent, because it was always in my instructor guide. It was always on schedule for the week. So memory work, I loved it. Now, oh my gosh, I forgot to bring there's a CD that always goes with the Sonlight programs. Did we use it? I started using it. I feel like it might be something I could use more as a review tool, or something just to be like stuck in the van and just kind of played over and over, and I think my kids would get it more. But am I worried that they didn't use the CD to learn and memorize some of the verses? No, I don't care either way. So that was the main text as well as Bible memory. And then there are a few missionary stories, which I'll talk a little bit more about this at the end, because this was also a favorite part for me. We talked through 2 different books, and this one's much smaller. This one's called Catching Their Talk in a Box, and this highlights Joy Ryderhoff, Ryderhoff's life as she was able to bring the Bible to different people groups and things like that, and she used it through recordings of the Bible. I thought it was really good. It was very short, and it was the first missionary book we went through, because in our previous Sonlight level, there wasn't a specific missionary story, I don't believe. But this is the first one, and they really liked it. I feel like what I like about having these types of stories, true stories, is to be able to discuss with them, like, what would they do? Wow, that's really scary to have to trust God to provide in this way. Things like that. And those are great conversations. The next one I'm holding up here is George Mueller. So we actually haven't quite finished it. This is something that we are working through still. We're officially done with our school year, but there were a few books that are kind of going into the summer, which I don't mind at all. And this book has held their attention. They have found the person of George Mueller to just be very interesting, just how his story starts off with him just being more selfish and worldly and all these things, and then just seeing how God captured his heart, and then how he has just like trusted him relentlessly with everything, even in scary circumstances where it's like he might not be able to provide for his wife and newborn baby and things like that. And then as he is going into his work with orphans, we're really kind of at the cusp of that part of the story, and it's been really good. So they've really liked this. So this was another one that the kids held up when I gave them all the books, and I was like, which ones were your favorite? They held up this one. So it's a really impactful book. All right. So before I get into the literature, the poetry book is kind of listed with the literature every day, and you go through a little bit at a time. There's so many that my kids really love. And then at the end of the school year, it asked them to pick their favorite and memorize it. I actually just took this book down and I just photocopied whichever one it was. And so they can have a photocopy of the poem that they're trying to memorize. And it's just been really fun to see which one they picked. Like my daughter picked a cute little butterfly one that was pretty short. And then my son picked a longer one about like this eel. And it was a really good one. So anyway, we liked the poetry. All right, to move into the books and the literature, which, yes, it's why I picked Sonlight. Let's just be honest. Well, not totally why I picked Sonlight, but it's what drew me to Sonlight, and what has kept me going with Sonlight are all of the read aloud books. Now, again, there's some readers that go with the language arts. I didn't bring those because we're just going through Sonlight HBL. So these are the read alouds that we read aloud together as a family. And these are in no particular order, but let me go through them. So we read A Year of the Baby. My daughter really loved this. This had a lot of adoption themes, and it was really impactful for the kids to be like, wow, maybe we should adopt. And they'd be like, Mom, do you want to adopt? I'm like, oh my gosh, that's overwhelming even thinking about that. But if God puts that on our heart, yes, we will follow. But it was just, it's cute to hear them like light bulb, like, oh, there's kids in need, and wow, we have a lot and we're very blessed. And so it was neat. Anyway, this is one that my son held up. So this is Homer Price. It's an oldie but goodie, right? It's very classic. So that's what I do love about Sonlight, is there's classic books and more modern books that they bring in to teach the kids stuff, to have them think about life, have them think about how life was at this time and things like that. But that's not why my son picked this book. It's funny. All of his favorites were all of the ones that were laugh out loud funny, and some of the things that happened in Homer Price, they're just funny. And then we're still working our way through this one as well. This might be my favorite. It's so sweet. Just this little girl who was just spoiled, and her every need was met, and she didn't have to lift a finger. She was thrust into a situation with some other relatives who are asking her to like do the dishes and help out, and she at first is so appalled, but then she gains confidence in herself, and she's like, wow, I can do these things. And I think why it's impacting me the most is just as a mom to be able to catch myself and be like, I don't want to do too much for my kids. They are capable of so much. And to be able to stop holding so tightly in areas I don't need to hold tightly, and loosen it and see where they could fly, see how they could take on certain things. So this is so good. We're in the middle, but okay. This is another one my son held up. So Happy Times and Noisy Village. So this is the second book following these kids in Sweden as they are growing up, and they live in just kind of this row of houses, and they're all friends, and they all do things together, and they get into trouble together, and it's sweet and funny. and my kids loved it. So then, though, this was my daughter's favorite. So it's one of the bigger books. It was read near the end of the year when we were studying Rome for history. So this one actually did line up historically. She loved it because she loves mysteries. She is my mystery kid. Like, if we are picking out books for her to read or for me to read to her, she always wants to read mysteries. So this is Detectives in Togas, and it's such a good book. It's really fun to follow this group of boys as they're trying to figure out what happened to their friend. Was he really guilty? Was he not? And how can they prove his innocence? It's so good. We loved it. Okay, Owls in the Family by Farley Mowat. You know what? This had some funny moments, but this was actually one of the ones my kids didn't like as much. They found it to be a little bit more boring. And what's interesting, in my opinion, these read similarly, but I think my son just really enjoyed the character of Homer a little bit better, and maybe he couldn't relate to these kids who were more on like the Saskatchewan prairie or something like that, and they found these baby owls and they were raising them, and they had lots of acreage and lots of animals, and that's just not our life. We don't homestead, we live in the suburbs, and so maybe it was just that, is they didn't relate as much to those kids, even though I thought the stories were equally funny. I don't know. But this is another one that both kids loved because it's so funny. This is Goonie Bird Green, and it gives me a little bit of like Pippi Longstocking vibes, where it's just this girl, she's very unique and very confident, and she tells stories. But I liked Goonie Bird's stories better than Pippi Longstocking's. I think she was just more clever. That's what my son really liked. He liked that all her stories seemed very fantastical until she told them, and then he realized she was kind of doing a play on words. But they both found it really funny. They really liked her character. And then this book, I feel like my kids liked, and it was nice because it gave context to a lot of different things like Hercules and the Cyclops and all of these stories that they have heard of and had heard reference to, the Greek myths, right? But did it hold their attention? Not as much. And it's probably because it wasn't a story. It was a lot of little stories, a lot of snippets of stories. And neither one of my kids found this to be a favorite book. I don't think they disliked it for what the reasons I just said. I think they found it interesting, but I would almost put this not in the literature pile, but in the history pile, if that makes sense. That's more how they engaged with it. They engaged with it more as like a history text than anything else. And then Charlotte's Web. Oh, right. I love this story. I asked if my son liked it, and he's like, nah, not really. It's kind of boring. I'm like, oh, but it's like Charlotte and Wilbur. And he's like, yeah, it just wasn't that funny. I'm like, okay. All right, fair enough. But we read Charlotte's Web. This was, I think, the first one. This might have been our first book of the year, which is just a really fun way to start the year out. Okay, then there's this, Little Pear. Again, my kids thought this was really funny. Probably my son more than anything, just due to the antics of this little boy in China. And he's like a 5-year-old, so he could imagine his little brothers, because I have twin 5-year-olds, doing some of these ridiculous things. And so he liked Little Pear. My daughter, she liked it, but not as much as my son. My daughter loved this book. So The Year of Miss Agnes. And so this was about this school teacher in Alaska and how she went to this remote village, and she was just really an inspirational figure for these kids who so far had like a rolling group of teachers up till that point, and this one just was more impactful. And I feel like my daughter has a little bit more of those like nurture and care for tendencies, and so she, I think, just engaged with this book more than my son, but he liked it too. I don't think there really was a book that they didn't like or enjoy, like one that was hard for us to get through or one they just were whiny. There was not a single book in the stack where they were whiny and did not want to read it. They liked all of these books. So that's a good guidepost for when I say they don't like a book, but they still listened really well. So this one's Henry Huggins by Beverly Cleary. This is such a cute story. And then it spurred on my son to go and find all the audiobooks for the rest of the Henry Huggins books. It was just about this boy, Henry, and his newfound dog, Ribsy, and it was just sweet. And it also had those kind of neighborhood friend vibes and just different stories of like when they went and entered their dogs into a dog show and whatnot. There was so many things that happened, and my son loved it. This one he didn't say it was like laugh out loud funny, so it wasn't part of his stack of like favorites, but I'd say this was right up there on like what he really loved, because he went on to read or listen to the rest of them. So those were all the resources, all the books we read this year for history, Bible, and literature. And so now I have some overall thoughts. First thought though is, if I asked my kids what their favorite subjects were, it was hands down anything that was Sonlight. My son loved the history and my daughter loved the science. And again, that's my next video. But they love learning through books. Now, do I feel like they actually learn stuff? Yes. And that's not because we do a lot of worksheets or really much of that kind of thing, but we do a lot of talking. And I feel like they were able to talk through different things. And I feel like what's fun is seeing them be able to connect things. Like for instance, what we're learning in the Bible, in the Old Testament, and then they'll be like, oh, Persia. I remember when Persia was like the ruler of the known world sort of thing. And they're like, oh, they can kind of put together some of those references from the Bible to the historical timeframes we're learning about. So they loved that. And I also just love that history is not boring, even though I kind of find the ancient history to be a little bit boring. It's just so many groups of people. So-and-so takes over so-and-so, who takes over so-and-so. You know, I have a tough time with it, but my kids really liked it. Now, did they remember it perfectly? Did they remember who attacked who? Or did they remember even sometimes who like these big groups of people were? Not always. And especially if it's been like months since they have learned it. But at the moment, they're able to engage with it. And I feel like that is the appropriate for the level I'm expecting from them, which is just exposure to these topics, not mastery by any means. So I love that Sonlight helps us with that, and it makes it come alive. And I'm really excited for the future levels that we get to do, because they link it even more tightly, where we're able to do more read alouds that are historical and can make those time frames come alive. So I love the history. As for the Bible, I feel like this year it was really impactful for my kids. I think it was just a big year for their faith. Like my son was baptized. He was baptized last weekend, and it was so special, and I'm so proud of him. And then my daughter put her faith in Jesus. Like we were able to talk through it, and we're discussing more things. She hasn't been baptized yet, but she's a new believer, and it's just really sweet to see your kids take on that, and also just their faith and their childlike faith and all of those things. And I feel like Sonlight really helped with that. I mean, it's not the only thing we do. We have an amazing church. We talk with them on the regular, but I feel like Sonlight just gives us a constant thing in our schedule where we get to talk about these things. And it's natural and it's easy, and it's not like, oh, while you're out playing, let me discuss Jesus with you. No, it's very much just a peg within our schedule, and I love that. And I loved the missionary stories, and so did my kids. I feel like they were very inspired. So I feel like the Bible was just what we needed. It was perfect for these years and for where my kids are spiritually, if you will. And then the literature was just good. I feel like I already kind of talked through my favorites for my kids, but I loved the fact that I'm reading it with my two big kids, and they each take different things out of it. They connect with different characters. They are able to explain the story in different ways because it impacted them differently. And I find that amazing and really interesting. And it really deepened the experience for both of them because they could hear what the other was saying. And so that's really fun. And so I'm really glad I get to combine my kids for Sonlight. And I'm going to keep that going as long as I can. And then just overall thoughts for me as kind of the teacher and the person who is organizing and doing all of the things. I love Sonlight. I love the instructor's guide. I've talked about it in a number of different videos, but I love just that it gives me that structure, but yet do I find myself needing to do it precisely? No, but I did find something out this year that has helped me, because in the past I would try and hold it really pretty loosely and be like, oh, when we get it done, I'll roll that over into the next week. But this past spring, I tried something different. I tried to focus on a week of Sonlight and trying to get it done within that week. And I feel like that actually served me personally a little bit better, because it would push me to kind of finish up some stuff and be like, oh, well, we didn't read any of the poetry. Let's get that done on Saturday breakfast, or You know, we're still reading some of the read aloud. So instead of reading our nightly read aloud, we're going to finish up Understood Betsy or whatever it is. I feel like it pushed me to kind of make sure we're getting some of the stuff done, but not in a stressful way. I don't want you to hear that. I feel like it was more in an encouraging way. It gave me the structure and it pushed me to finish it in a timely manner, and then I'm not feeling like I'm behind. I'm feeling like I've got this, as opposed to like, oh, I keep rolling things over, I keep rolling things over, and then it's just like weighty and weighty, you know what I mean? So I actually found that that might work really well for me, and I'm gonna keep going with that moving forward as I'm gonna kind of look through our yearly schedule, which I actually have a video planned for this, and how I'm gonna set up Sonlight with that. So stay tuned for that, and I'll just go way more in detail because this video got really long and I'm really sorry about that, but I'm hoping it was helpful. For those of you who are thinking about picking up Sonlight, the HBL-B, these are my thoughts. These are the things that have really worked for us. Again, go see some monthly updates for kind of like boots on the ground information, like how it was feeling at the time. But it's been a huge hit. Obviously, we're using Sonlight HBL-C next year because it really fits my family. But let me know down below if you have any questions for me. Anything that you are wondering about the program or if it would work for your kids, I'll try and answer that. I would love to chat with you about Sonlight. I love chatting about Sonlight. So that's what I have, you guys. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't already, please subscribe. It's wonderful to have you here. But otherwise, guys, I will see you in the next homeschool video. All right, take care.